Hi, subscribe to Real Stories so you don't miss new stories. I had a feeling that something was not quite right with my wife Caroline. Not much, but enough for someone who had known her for 12 years. 10 of which we had been married. Caroline and I had a typical Scandinavian family with 2 children, a 7-year-old boy and a 5-year-old girl. We lived in our own house near the county capital. Both of us worked full-time, Caroline for the municipality and I for a small consulting firm. We met in a night class on advanced Microsoft Excel and got married 2 years later. Like any other couple, we had ups and downs, but nothing serious, at least from my perspective. The first signs appeared about a month after our 10th anniversary. There was a subtle decline in her interest in marital responsibilities. It's not that she rejected me, but she started suggesting quick displays of affection more often than participating in lovemaking much more often than before. Another subtle sign was an increase in her clothing expenses. She also became more critical of me for no apparent reason. Caroline always spent at least 2 nights a week with her friends engaging in various innocent activities like aerobics, nighttime bowling classes and badminton. Only a couple of late nights the year were spent with the girls at a bar or restaurant when someone in the group wanted to celebrate. I made an effort, but I couldn't see any new or strange patterns in her nighttime outings. My colleague Eric noticed that I was having trouble in my marriage and suggested finding out the truth instead of feeling as bad as I did. I told him that a private detective could uncover the truth, but I couldn't hire one for 2 simple reasons. First, there was none in the phone book, at least not in our city or the entire county. Secondly, even if there were one, I didn't have the money to monitor Caroline for an extended period. But I promised to do everything I could to resolve the issues between Caroline and me. The last straw came on the first Saturday night after Eric suggested something to me. Caroline and I went to a pleasant dinner with friends near the town where she behaved as an affectionate wife all night. She even held it in the taxi back home that we shared with another couple. Of course, I expected to continue the pleasant evening by making love to her. However, as soon as the babysitter left our house, Caroline stopped being so sweet and cut me with her words. Forget it. If you were dumb enough to expect anything from me tonight. I gave up my S and responded with a radiant smile. What could I expect from a cold and frigid woman? Nothing more was said that night, but it took me several hours to fall asleep. I used that time to come up with a simple plan. All I needed to do was subscribe to an online anonymity service so that I could send emails without being traced. After testing the email service on Sunday morning, I sent the following email to Caroline on Monday while she was at work. Dear Mrs. Emmon, with great disappointment I have evidence of your infidelity, which makes me pity your husband and envy your lover for enjoying such a magnificent woman as yourself. Of course, I feel a strong temptation to share my information with your husband, but I have a better proposal because I want and need to spend quality time with the magnificent woman sponsored by you during my next business trip. Therefore, I hope you will be sitting alone at Cafe Plaza today from 2:30 to 3 o'clock with €600 in an envelope on the table. My friend will greet you. You are Lars' sister, right? You should respond, I'm not his wife. After that, you should hand over the envelope. Thank you for your kind cooperation. A true friend. €600 was a very insignificant amount that couldn't be considered serious blackmail. If reported to the police, it was unlikely they would treat it as a high-priority case to save the reputation of an unfaithful wife. On the other hand, it was small enough for Caroline to withdraw from an ATM without any trouble. That on that Monday I suggested to Eric that we take a 3-hour break at Cafe Plaza. We entered a few minutes before 3 and to my faint surprise I saw Caroline sitting alone at a table. Then to my genuine surprise I saw Martin Henson sitting alone at a table a few tables away from her. This Martin also worked for the municipality and was married to one of Caroline's closest friends. We had dinner with them last Saturday, but I didn't notice anything special between him and Caroline. Carol and Martin, I exclaimed loudly, what's going on here? Why are you two here instead of working? Why don't you sit at the same table? Martin fled without saying a word, and following him Caroline quietly left the cafe. Eric was even more confused than I was when I told him that we probably caught Caroline with her lover. After that I called Martin's wife Celia and asked her if she had any idea why my wife and her husband took half a day off and sat at separate tables in the cafe. Then I told her that I suspected Caroline was having an affair, and now Martin had to be the prime suspect if he didn't provide a very good explanation. She promised to have a serious conversation with Martin and Call me when she found out something. This Martin was a very handsome man, generally well dressed, polite with good manners and a true party lover. Of course those of us who had known him since childhood had a completely different opinion of him. At home we checked our bank account, where it was evident that €600 had been withdrawn and deposited again on that day. At this point that information was enough for me, so I filled out the divorce papers I had picked up from the courthouse during lunch break. When Caroline returned home she was as angry as a hornet and lashed out at me. You behaved horribly at the cafe. I can explain everything if you make an effort to listen. I replied, no, I don't want to listen, because I'm not interested in your explanations. Just read these divorce papers and sign everything. It's a 50-50 split across the board and you can't get a better deal even with a lawyer, which will cost you a fortune. I said it was clear that she was truly furious and she yelled at me, these divorce papers are the only reasonable thing you've done in a long time. Boiling with anger she signed the divorce papers without reading them and shouted, it will be a relief for me to have a real man instead of a loser like you. That's how my marriage ended. Caroline left the house and I didn't care where she went. Later Cecilia called me sobbing and told me that Martin had confessed to an affair with Caroline. Now she was crying and begging for his forgiveness. She said she didn't know what to do and demanded that Martin move out and stay with his parents for the next 2 weeks so she could think about their future. I told her that Caroline and I had already signed the divorce papers. One thing was certain, if Caroline considered Martin her new ideal man she could forget about that, but it wasn't my place to tell her. After the call I moved all of Caroline's clothes to the guest room, which infuriated her. When she came home I couldn't resist the temptation to tell her that I had informed Cecilia about what I saw at Café Plaza. This information didn't make her any happier. Strange things happened the next day. When I got home from work Caroline surprised me by saying, dear Lars, I'm sorry and regret everything said yesterday. In my bad mood I was stressed and said things I didn't mean. Can you forgive me? That's why you are and always will be my true love. No more hard feelings. We're adults and we're expected to do our best to work through our problems. Please tear up those silly divorce papers we signed yesterday in a fit of anger, and I promise to be a much better and loving wife, and I'll explain everything about yesterday. She said. I looked her straight in the eyes when I said the divorce papers are at the courthouse and I already know everything about Martin and your affair last night after you left. Martin confessed to Cecilia that he cheated on you, and that explains why our marriage has been loveless lately. I suspected your infidelity, but I didn't find real evidence until Martin confessed to Cecilia. Caroline's face took on a strange expression when I said, but how did you manage to get me to sign the divorce papers hours before Cecilia told you about Martin's confession? I had had enough on Saturday night, and after a few sleepless hours I decided that divorce was my only possible solution. The decision to divorce was made many hours before that crybaby Martin admitted your infidelity. I'm sorry and I would like to do everything I did with Martin. Can you give me a second chance and forgive me? No, because I'll never understand how you could prefer Martin over me and dream of him as a real man. I'll never forget how you humiliated me ever since you fell for him, but this mess will be yours when Cecilia is done with him. You probably didn't know that all the inherited assets, savings, the house and the expensive cars are the private property of the only thing Martin owns. They are a bunch of debts since his business went bankrupt. Now Martin will lose his expensive Rolex and BMW. If those toys impressed you, if you really love this crybaby guy, you'll have to support him in his expensive habits. I replied, I made a terrible mistake and I'll never understand how I could be so foolish to let myself be tempted and deceived by that slippery worm. I'd rather stay alone for the rest of my life than have anything in common with him. Caroline continued. Office gossip reported that Martin left Caroline when she told him about the divorce papers she had signed offering to be an official couple. This explains why she begged me the day after signing the divorce papers to forgive her and cancel the divorce. Martin managed to avoid me ever since he saw us at the Café Fay. By the second day after his confession the doctor put him on medical leave due to stress and physical problems. As expected, Cecilia filed for divorce after a 2-week